light breaks the shadow of the weary heart. Truth cuts the dark like a flaming dart. Voices rising strong to lift the call. This is the time we give it all.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Lynn Scott Hagerman podcast, where truth has no filter, freedom is our mission, and light exposes the darkness. I am your host, Lynn Scott Hagerman, survivor of child trafficking from birth until 5 years old, also a survivor of medical experimentation at a U.S. university underground at their medical center through government-sponsored MK Ultra mind control. I am the voice they tried to silence, and I am silent no more. Praise God. Today, I'm also an independent LifeWave distributor. I am an international award-winning human resource consultant, marathoner, weightlifter, child of God, follower of the Lord Jesus Christ, and friend to Holy Spirit, standing strong before you today in mind, body, and spirit. Please visit my website, qgrit.org, which is God's plan on the aftercare of helping the little ones once they've been rescued from above ground or underground trafficking, as well as to help adults with any type of trauma, including veterans, which is our topic today. Also, please be sure to visit liveyoungerwithlynn.com, where the LifeWave technology, the X39 and Celergize, activates our stem cells. It is the wearable med bed, and it does help with trauma of any kind, including with the veterans we're going to talk about today. Decreased my PTSD and anxiety by 70%. I'll tell you that. Saved my life. I'm sure I'll visit more about that later, because today we're going to talk about this, our warriors betrayed, the suicide, the overmedication. We're in a fight for truth when it comes to our beloved veterans, and thank each and every one of you for your service who's listening. I'm going to before I bring my guest on, I'm going to tell you a story. There was a recent Wall Street Journal article on July 31st of this year, and it was called Combat Cocktail: How America Overmedicates Veterans. And it started out with the story about a veteran named Griffin, and I'm going to read to you what was written in that article about Griffin. Diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, Griffin served as a paratrooper with Special Operations Forces, seeing intense combat in Afghanistan, Syria, and Iraq. Army doctors put him on what veterans call the combat cocktail, a dangerous mix of powerful drugs taken simultaneously. Over the course of a decade, Griffin's medical records show prescriptions for nightmares, migraines, anxiety, depression, and even the side effects of the drugs themselves. At times, he was on 3 and sometimes as many as 9 different central nervous system drugs at one time. Even after his discharge in 2022, the VA continued several of these medications. And what was the result? Well, I'm sure you know. Waking nightmares, brain fog, and no warning about the risks. Griffin said, and this is a quote, "I became a government lab rat. And those of you who've been following me for a while, I became a government rat lab too. I understand this fully. Only with me, it was experimentation to make the Big Pharma that's now harming the vets and others in we the people in the United States of America." This is Griffin again. "The pills didn't do anything. They just make you numb like a zombie, and it made things far worse." And sadly, his story is not unique. We have thousands of veterans facing the same betrayal. That's why today's guest is so important. John Spagnola is the president and CEO of DC Strategic Solutions. It's a consulting and advocacy organization that builds coalitions to influence government and legislative policy for the greater good. And for over a decade, John's been at the forefront of championing veteran health and safety. And today, we're going to talk about the truth. We're going to discuss the crisis that the United States of America is in regarding this veteran suicide. We're going to talk about the hidden dangers of polypharmacy and why written informed consent is both a moral and a medical imperative. And I am so honored and so blessed to have John with us today. Welcome to the show, John.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here, Lynn. I appreciate the invitation.
You are very, very welcome. And I want to start getting into this horrific assault happening on our veterans after they've served our country so gloriously. And now we have such a high rate of suicide. And before we get into that, I would like to know, and I know my audience would like to know a bit about you. So who is John Spagnola, and how did you end up getting in this fight?
Well, great question, and I'd be glad to answer it. Sometimes I ask myself the same question.
It's a good one then.
But, it really becomes an issue of passion and purpose, where you see something and you know it's wrong, or something's misdirected and needs to get changed. And that's what happened when I was focused and I kept looking at the suicide stats, that after 20 years, with all the added billions and billions of dollars that keeps getting allocated to, quote, resolving veteran suicides and their health outcomes, really there's been little change. And the stats have not gone down in terms of the suicides, where we're losing over 6,000 precious warriors every year. Now, there are statistics that demonstrate double that, because when you take in consideration that veterans might commit suicide intentionally by driving their car into an embankment or over a cliff, or other ways where they want to overdose themselves or what have you, that those might be classified as accidents,
Right.
or overdoses or these kinds of things, and don't get listed as part of the suicide statistics. So I saw one article study that said about 42 veterans take their lives, every day. And
Every day, John.
yeah. And that's what's so disgusting, because they managed to get through the trauma and the combat and the bullets and the bombs and so on, and come back, sort of in alive, I should say, at least. And I'm not saying unscathed, because of course there's a lot of problems that happen in battle, but they were able to get back. And unlike in World War II, when they came back and they had an extra year to kind of integrate back into the society, and they had all kinds of assistance from their priests or their ministers and their friends and so on, that really took care of them and their buddies. They knew transitioning is much quicker, and it's not with the same amount of care that was, apparent, say, after World War II. And I think that's a real negative situation that's resulted in them wondering, well, what do I do now? And instead of seeing their priest or their friends, they're told, see your medical doctor if you have a problem. Well, I'm not sure that's necessarily the right person to see. I mean, maybe in some cases, but what I think they needed is to be part of their team that they just separated from, and then missing that. Having that teamship is so important to a veteran. And the idea of a purpose and a pathway forward when it comes to their work. They want to be able to be productive. They don't want to sit around and just say, well, I was the victim of battle. That's not who they are. They're proud, they're successful, and they've got strong intention to contribute again in a big way. And when they're allowed to do so, they become pretty amazingly impressive employees. So I think we need to take a look at that. So anyways, that kind of helped, a long-winded way of explaining my purpose and my passion, because they deserve assistance And what's been going on in terms of what I've seen is unacceptable. And I've managed to work with a slew of wonderful national, what they call VSOs, and that stands for Veteran Service Organizations. Groups
Yes.
you might be aware of, like the American Legion, VFW, DAV, and a whole bunch of others um, that are aligned in wanting to stop the suicides, have been doing everything in their power to do that. So that when I found this issue that we're going to discuss, and I alerted them to it, they come on board and they're working with me shoulder to shoulder on that issue now.
Well, praise God for that. And when you were describing our veterans, so my day job, I'm an international human resource consultant. And part of what I do is I fill positions for companies. And I have to say, over the years, the some of the best hires a company can ever have are our veterans, because they are amazing people to employ. Their training is astounding, their leadership skills. They have so many assets that people who have not been in the military weren't able to possibly hone because of that incredible training and experience that they had. And our vets are such a gift to our society, and it is mission critical to get them productive in the workplaces, because workplaces need their skills. And it just breaks my heart to hear, because I have been watching this and hearing about this for a bit now. Breaks my heart to think about, like you said, these proud warriors who are so highly skilled, but thinking that they reach a place where suicide is the answer.
Yes, it's appalling. It's disgusting what's happening with them, and that nothing's been done for, again, 10 to 20 years
It's shocking.
to lessen, that statistic. It got me looking and thinking of why. And I dug into a manual. It's the VA manual called the Veteran Health Administration Manual. And
Yeah.
that's what all the rules and regulations are concerning health and the veteran. And as I went through it, I was looking for some clues of what could we change, or maybe what's omitted or overlooked. And then I stumbled what I believe now is a foundational piece
Okay.
that I've brought attention to. And that is, there's something that I think your audience has heard and some are probably very familiar with, and it's a term called informed consent.
Yes.
And it may seem simplistic, but it's very, very intrinsic and foundational to our health and doing better and continuing with proper health outcomes. In informed consent, one has to look, the doctor has to look at the risk benefit ratio. How much good will come from this treatment? How
Right.
much negative might come from this treatment? He needs to weigh those and apprise the veteran of what he is up against, so the veteran can make the decision of the treatment he wants. Now, that's something, unfortunately, that I found most veterans don't realize. It's their decision on what treatments they accept and apply or refuse. They can say, I want nothing. That's their right. But
Yes.
no one tells them that. I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, I didn't. I was just agreeing with you, John. Yes, it is their right to choose.
Yes, it is. And unless someone educates them on that, see, and I think that's part of the downfall of the system to that degree. There's not been a real education to the veteran on so many aspects of his health. And the reason I believe that's the case, in no small part, has to do with the informed consent that they receive or don't receive is based on something called verbal consent. Now,
Okay.
verbal consent basically means the doctor's telling you, what are the side effects and so on verbally. Now, that might sound fine, and that's been the operating basis for 20 years for high risk medications. But how do you monitor whether or not that's occurring if it's verbal?
Correct.
How do you know if any veteran knows his rights or knows the risks and the benefits of his treatments and whether he was told them, right? And how do you enforce that to make sure it's happening if it's verbal? You can't.
No, you can't.
There's no mechanism to do that. And so I looked at that and went, oh my God. And I worked with a congressman some years ago to get the GAO to do a study on the VA. And the GAO is the Government Accountability Office. And they can only be directed by Congress for studies. Citizens cannot employ them, right?
Right.
And they did a study that resulted in showing that the veterans, there was no evidence by the VA that the veterans were being told that they had treatment options outside of medications. In other words, chiropractic treatment, canine treatment, hyperbaric treatment, yoga, exercise, cognitive behavioral treatment. These are all other workable, treatments that have shown good results. And if the veteran doesn't know, it's not being told like the study showed, how are they ever going to take part in them, right? So
Exactly.
I looked at all the fact that, again, part of informed consent is not only knowing the side effects, but it's knowing they have choices, other treatments. And I looked at that and I went, my God, I've spent a lot of time trying to get treatments okayed and get them passed because I work with the Congress up in Washington and I work with the national groups. But if I've spent that, and certainly these groups have worked tirelessly to try to get these treatments approved, but if the veterans aren't aware they exist, how valuable is our work or the bills that we've gotten passed, and some of them that have actually been appropriated in terms of support. So I just looked at it and I said, listen, the way let me add another piece, and that is over time, there was an opioid crisis, if you remember,
Yes.
some years ago, that was pretty much overwhelming in the VA. And so what took place was the VA applied written informed consent to long-term pain opioids. Not all opioids, but long-term pain opioids, right?
Right.
And they did that based on the GAO study that said, we've got to monitor this. We got to make more certain that they know, the risk-benefit ratios of the side effects and what treatment options are available. And as a result of that, it is now mandated. Again, only verbally enforced, unfortunately, and with the high-risk medications, but mandated with long-term pain opioids. The veteran must sign a form that says, I was told the treatment options, and I was told the side effects of the medications that I'm about to take. Now, this is before he gets it, and that's how it's supposed to be. Yes.
So they have the mechanism in place to be able to do that if they choose to.
Yes, for long-term pain opioids, it's
Right.
there, it's on the books, it's mandated. It came about because of over-medication with opioids. But these other drugs that are high risk, such as antidepressants, you hear a lot about SSRIs, which are a form of antidepressants. What's the first side effect of antidepressants? Suicide ideation. Now, that's per the FDA who did the studies. It's not my opinion. Antipsychotics, the strongest drug that one can take. Drugs like Abilify, and others, like Zyprexa. Extremely antipsychotic drugs. And I'm not saying there's never a need for these medications. I'm just saying the veteran should know what the side effects are, what he's about to take, what is he going to experience potentially, right?
Yes.
Um, because if you have a veteran and suddenly he experiences one of the side effects of these drugs, which is hallucinations. Well, if you're a veteran, you're experiencing hallucinations, you might think, God, I'm mentally insane. Or what,
Yes.
right?
Anybody would.
Right? Or what? And maybe you happen to just have a fight with the wife, or she left, or your employer just fired you, and now you're thinking you're mentally insane, right? You may have a drastic thought that, well, why am I sticking around? I'm a burden to everybody. I'm broken. You see how they could leap to that conclusion?
Yes, I could.
And if they have the side effect of suicide ideation, and suddenly they start thinking, "Oh my God, um, I have to commit suicide, and I must be broken, so I'm just going to go do it." Versus, if the doctor told them prior in the interview, you may experience suicide ideation. You might have, urges to commit suicide. You may have urges for um, hallucinations, or have hallucinations, or experience depression, or experience homicide, another side effect, or experience anxiety, which are commonly medicated without any looking into the actual sources of what could be causing these, right?
Exactly.
Um, and just to finish the other categories of the drugs that um, are high risk that need written informed consent, I mentioned antidepressants and antipsychotics, but there's also stimulants. And, they even give those to our children in school at times. You've heard of ADHD drugs like Ritalin and Adderall, right? And now it's an adult disorder for adults if you get dispersed. I mean, I should be triple dosed if that were the case, but you know, especially when I was in school. But we had exercise then. They've taken exercise out of the schools now. We had gym there to get off and burn our energy, taking that out of schools. So the poor kid's sitting there, not to go off too much on another issue, but he's sitting there with all this energy. And the mom, probably not knowing any better, uh, gave him sugared cereal before he went to school and maybe some Coke or something. And, here he is jittering in his chair, and they're going, oh, he's got a mental disease and we have to drug the little guy. And this is what happens. And unfortunately, schools get paid every time a child is considered disabled and placed on a medication. And the parents, if they're poor parents, indigent, they get paid. So there's these incentives in the schools, and unfortunately, there's incentives in the veteran community too to take, the medications versus maybe other treatments. So I mentioned stimulants. I didn't mention anxiolytics. That's another category. They encompass benzodiazepines. Those are like Valium, you know, some of these
Yes.
drugs. They're very difficult to get off in terms of the addiction power of these drugs, right? In the last category that we would like covered by written informed consent is narcotics. So we have 5 classifications that we'd like to have added to the current directive that already directs the veterans on long-term pain opioids. And that directive is called Informed Consent for Long-Term Pain Therapy for Pain, and it's VHA Directive 1005, if anyone wants to take a look at it and see that's what's working. And actually, there's some information that shows that since it was applied, there was a 67% reduction in the prescriptions for long-term pain opioids.
That's amazing because people knew what they were getting into. See, that's the travesty throughout this whole big pharma is that there's no true understanding of the side effects. It reminds me of the MK Ultra brainwashing. Frankly, we're constantly seeing television commercials with these big pharma drugs, and scrolling across the bottom these horrific side effects to where it's just become a, oh, these horrific things could happen. I'll still take this drug without the true informed consent of this is this is true and actual, and this percentage of the people have had this effect. And by signing off and agreeing, reading, this could happen to me, I believe a lot fewer people will take the big pharma because we do have the most astounding natural healing modalities available. And none of them, you talked about that. This topic makes me so passionate with our veterans and everybody. You talk about the risk benefit assessment. With all the natural healing modalities, there are no risks, there's only benefits. But with the big pharma, huge risks.
No, that's an excellent point, and that's a point I brought up as well because you know the first principle of medicine is to first do no harm.
It's supposed to be.
Where did that go?
I don't know, John. I don't
Right.
know. It went somewhere.
Well, and that's the problem. A doctor is supposed to think in those terms. He's supposed to align everything he does with the terms of first, do no harm. And you bring up an excellent point. If you can do exercise therapy, which veterans love, or yoga, or, have a dog with canine therapy and have that wonderful relationship that makes you
Yes.
feel, you know, love and emotion again and
Yeah.
care. And I belong to a group on equine therapy. I'm on the board where veterans love horses. And, they feel the power of a horse, and it has a major impact on them because it's just not someone talking at them. It's this giant beast of a beautiful animal that they can't push around. And they know they've met their match when it comes to power and strength. And it makes them feel good, and it brings the best out in them. But there's so many different, and hyperbaric therapy is remarkable because it just adds all this pure oxygen, to you, and that opens up blood flow and nerve function, and turns around conditions like traumatic brain injury and what they call PTSD, right? Which is
Yes.
really a conglomerate of different undesirable symptoms, right? So yes, they should have the ability to understand they can start with these least invasive techniques. There's another one I just wanted to mention because I've been very impressed with it recently. It's called Epic Clinics. And what it does, it's a chiropractic technique that takes an x-ray of your spine and what they call the atlas, that's your top vertebrae. And if that's not aligned, it can inhibit blood flow and nerve flow. And what's more important than blood flow and nerve flow for anything to get better, right? And
Exactly.
I went through it personally because I was told I had bursitis, a lot of pain in my shoulder. I had it for 6 months, and I was like, couldn't find a solution. I went to this Epic Clinics, and what I found was took an X-ray, shot a sound wave at my atlas, a sound wave, right?
Yes.
How
Yes.
invasive is a sound wave, right?
That's right.
Right. And I look at the doctor I hear a click, from the sound waves being shot, and I said, "Did the treatment start?" And he looks at me and he goes, "No, we're done." And I said, "What do you mean we're done? I didn't feel anything." He goes, "Yeah, that's okay. Why don't you stand up?" So I stand up. He goes, "Move around that arm and shoulder with all the pain in it." Completely gone. Immediately. I was astounded. And now there's been Super Bowl players that have done it. I've even brought a congressman and his chief of staff have done it. People from Hollywood have come. But who knows about these things unless, like the other treatments, unless, we disseminate and educate the veterans that such treatments are available.
Well, exactly. And I want to tag on to that because we have a whole list of natural healing modalities. And I'm going to throw up a QR code for my Lifeway website, liveyoungerwithlynn.com, and just share just a minute about that because I know I have veterans and their loved ones listening. Because of my childhood, John, I have always equated what I went through as being in a Nazi concentration camp. It was no different, and I have always resonated with POWs because you're taken by the enemy and you're held against your will, and they have complete control to do whatever they would like to do to you while you're there. And I developed chronic PTSD and anxiety from it, just like a vet would. And I'm going to throw up another QR code too, my qgrit.org website that people can go to where I list all of the natural healing modalities that help me. And the top three are the Lord Jesus Christ and forgiveness and LifeWave. So I'm going to throw that QR code up there too. And in 2022, I heard the audible voice of God, John, and he said, just like this, I have not been in the military, but if I would have been, he sounded like a commander in chief. And he said like this, I want my people healed, just like that. And he told me to look into non-invasive healing modalities. And the number one he led me to was LifeWave. No drugs, no chemicals, just like you mentioned, frequency technology. It's
Hmm.
got also light therapy in it, and your body just recovers naturally. And when I started that, the first month, my PTSD and anxiety decreased by 70%. And it's been like compound interest in a bank, getting better and better and better. And I will never make guarantees, but I will say 100% of the people who've had PTSD, anxiety, similar conditions that have started on LifeWave, they start getting relief the first month. And then it's like compound interest in a bank. It saved my life. And there are no bad side effects, just like with the big pharma, like everything. So we have in this show already given veterans a list of options and healing modalities for them to look at as an alternative to these harmful big pharma drugs.
I just wanted to interject. We had not discussed LifeWave, the patch that you talked about, right?
Yeah,
It just so happens that one of the doctors, he's a nutritionist, pretty brilliant person. Uh, I have an aunt up in New England, and she's in her 70s,
yeah.
maybe even 80. And she has a very swollen lower leg. I mean, it looks like a block. It's so swollen,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And I looked at that when I went and visited, and I said, oh my God, there's got to be something that can be done. And I talked to the nutritionist, and he suggested the LifeWave patch.
Interesting.
I sent
Yep.
it to her, and it was the first thing she told me that
Mm,
had results. There you go.
yeah.
That had results, and it actually decreased the amount of the swollenness of the leg. And she just kept on thanking me. And it wasn't me, of course, it was the patch. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that because we had never even discussed that I know about it.
No, we didn't. And that's the amazing technology because when stem cells are by the time we're in our 30s, half of them don't work. By the time we hit 60, none of them work, our stem cells,
Yeah.
until the X39 patch. And when the stem cells are activated, that was our first cell at conception. It made our body, and it's our natural God-given fixer. And it can fix anything that's wrong. It's technology for so long. Our Western healthcare system, and frankly, John, at times I'll call it the unhealthcare system, but they do not share these natural healing modalities. They're not trained in it. They're trained, take a pill, cut it off. That's what they know. And there are all these amazing other natural healing modalities.
Well, you're exactly right. And part of the problem you just referred to in terms of the training stems from the changes that occurred back in the 20s and 30s when Rockefeller, from the books I've read, came around and he was dealing with petroleum because, of course, he was famous for oil, and decided, hey, I could also make some profits if I, maybe get involved in medications because then, petroleum can take part in making medications. And from the readings that I have done, what occurred is that he got with the universities and said, listen, he just gave them grants, free money, lots of money, got them sort of addicted to the idea of lots of money, and then came back with them and said, if you want this to continue, you will stop the natural treatments and you will only teach and use medications. And that has become the philosophy of universities from around the country. And one book that goes over that is called The Drug Story. And it's an amazing book, and it goes back to even talking about how Rockefeller's father was a charlatan that sold raw petroleum as an elixir. So it's pretty amazing to read this. And this was written in 1949 or something along that line. So quite a read for me, at least, to bring up. But now that we touched upon that, I think it's important that we mentioned do no harm as the first principle. Well,
Yes.
there was another principle that was in play for many years that also seems to have gone by the wayside, and it's called a differential diagnosis. And that simply means that before you provide a diagnosis, you test and eliminate for any other potential causes first. Makes sense, doesn't it?
It does make sense. I mean, kind of logical, John.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's sometimes that's what we're missing in a society is logic, right?
Yeah, that's
And
right.
common sense. But yeah, you're supposed to test first. And there's a British medical journal article that goes over that, and I have several other studies that says you must do that first, and get rid of any organic or inorganic causes, right? Now, keep in mind, and there's studies on this, nutritional deficiencies like B12, for instance, could be a major vitamin D, probably the most important vitamin one can take. If you have deficiencies in those and others, you can experience depression, anxiety, suicide tendencies. Sound familiar?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
All hallucinations that can all come about from just nutritional deficiency. So should we test for that first? You would think,
Yes,
right?
we should. Yes, we should.
Number two, hormone imbalances. How can hormones make you feel less emotional or more emotional or with no emotion? They run the gamut. And so again, I work with a neuroendocrinologist that has taken 4,000 veterans and turned around traumatic brain injury just by adjusting their hormones.
John.
And he uses a tool, a questionnaire tool to begin with, right? And his name is Mark L. Gordon, if anyone wants to do any research on him. Caring, brilliant person who just lives his life to help veterans. And his daughter is a medical doctor, and he has another one that's a chiropractor, and just a wonderful person. But lots of studies, lots of results. The third underlying cause, and again, I'm not saying it's the only one. There's
Sure.
allergies and so on, and what have you, but it's a major one. And the other underlying factor that I think we need to do some testing on is chemical toxins. And I'm not just referring to Agent Orange or burn pits that they breathe. This is when they light the Saudi Arabia skies or Iraq skies on fire from all the trash they burn, and the skies become black. with all the pollutants that rain down upon the veterans,
Yeah.
and they breathe this. And you know, and they come back and you're wondering why they're ill or what they've gone through. And then recently they have this, what they call, you know, the Agent Orange also got into the water. That that didn't get uh, uh, noted as a problem for like 10, 20 years.
Mhm.
And now that's called blue water, Navy. And now finally that's being, you know, addressed. And they're getting compensated for this. But chemical toxins can come from medications as well. And it can come, you mentioned Griffin was on 9 medications at once.
Yes.
I was talking with a executive director of one of the veteran service organizations. She told me she has a veteran on 40 medications at once.
40.
40.
40. Oh, John, that, and I'm sure half the medications at least are because of side effects of the medications before that. It's such a circular, illogical process to prescribe this big pharma medication.
Yes, even the sponsor of the bill that we'll talk about on written
Yeah.
consent, he told me he has a veteran that talked to him was on 32 medications at once. And I've since heard 65. Um, it's, unfortunately, it's not even uncommon now for veterans to be on 5 to 10 at once. Not uncommon. Now you got to understand, there's no studies on that. We're using, to that degree, intentionally enough, we're using them as guinea pigs, right? And we have no idea what the interactions are, and some interaction can cause instant death. And so there's this quagmire. And see, if there was written informed consent, that one veteran that I noted would have to have been told the side effects 40 times. Is it
Yes.
likely he'd be on 40 medications? I don't think so. See what I mean?
That's very
that's,
true.
that's why it's so vital that, you know, we get this bill passed, we wake up Congress, we wake up the, you know, the veterans community, because these guys are warriors, they're loyal, they're caring,
Yes.
you know, their heart, you know, is all about helping, and they're proud. They don't want to ask for help. They don't like to ask for help. So it's our job to take responsibility for them as they took responsibility for us. And they put their life on the line. And now it's our turn to go, hey, you know, we're giving back. We're going to make sure that the procedures are transparent. You know your rights. You know what the treatment options are. You know what the side effects are. As a matter of fact, I put a one-pager together, if I may,
Yes, please.
that I believe veterans should take with them to their interviews, because when you go to a medical interview, you tend to be a little nervous, no matter who you are. And veterans, no different. And so these are the questions on the sheet, and your audience can contact you, and I'll get the sheet to you so you can get it to them if you like.
Yes.
But it basically says things to ask your doctor. Are there dangerous side effects, risk of dependency, thoughts of suicide, depression, anxiety, visual or auditory hallucinations that I should be aware of? If I experience them, what should I do?
There you go. Yes.
Question 2, should I expect any dangerous interactions with other medications I may be taking? If so, please describe. 3, are there other treatment options, i.e., chiropractic, acupuncture, exercise therapy, etc., art therapy, available to treat my condition? If so, please let me know my options. Then the last paragraph just says, remember, your treatment is your decision per the Veterans Administrative Handbook. It's not the doctor's decision. And I also end with saying, since 2 heads are better than 1, it may be helpful to bring a support person or a friend with you to your VA appointment, so you both could be asking these questions and fielding, his points and making sure risk benefit is being applied here.
Those are excellent. I love those questions. Matter of fact, I was going to ask you about those questions because I know we were talking off air about that to help our vets.
Yes, and I got one of the national veteran groups. I haven't done it yet, so I'm not going to name who, but they're a very good sized group. Went over those questions, and they said we want to put that in one of our booklets and send it out to our membership. So I think right away, even before the bill gets passed, we could put a tourniquet on a lot of the suicides and improve health outcomes, and also make sure the veterans know if they experience any of these symptoms, right, that, that they in fact realize it could be coming from the medication. And again, I'm not saying the medications are bad. I'm not saying the medications are not needed. Maybe 40 at once, maybe I'd say that about, but when there's no studies on it. But, we have to always look at the risk benefit ratio and discuss that with the patient or the veteran so that they have full informed consent. Now, I met with the VA secretary on this issue briefly.
Good.
Secretary Collins, and he said he's evaluating it and looking at applying it. Because if he wanted to, even without a bill, he could put it into gear and make it happen. So if you happen to know him, please let him know that this would be a good idea, putting it into gear, because he can do it administratively. I'll still follow up with the legislation. And the reason I would do that is if he leaves office, his new person that would come in and take his place could change it. So the legislation could protect written informed consent from being changed. And that's why I'm continuing with that. And if I could, I just wanted to mention some of the groups, by the way, that's supporting the legislation.
Yes.
Because we have a really good number of them. And American Legion, which is the largest, VFW, DAV, those three groups alone, close to 5 million veterans. They represent.
That's right.
Disabled, Jewish War Veterans, Reserve Officers Association of America, Association of the United States Navy. They even had me on, and we did a show, and they put on their website. Special Operations Association of America, Fleet Reserves Association, Military Veteran Advocacy, Marine Corps Reserve Association, Navy SEAL Foundation, Vietnam Veterans of America, Air Force Sergeants Association, Grunt Style Foundation. They're involved in a lot of the military clothing. It's pretty popular. Yes. American Veterans, also known as AMVETS,
yes.
Fourth largest group. Military Order of the Purple Heart are supporting it. And a very, very well-known and extremely well-recognized group, as always are really, Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors, also known as TAMPS. So all of those groups have officially supported the bill, and several of them have passed their own resolutions.
Oh, good.
In supporting the bill. And again, if you get requests for those, I can get those to you for your audience if they're interested.
That would be amazing. So we are going to take a quick commercial break and be right back, folks.
A life empowered is closer than you think. We're all looking for a better way. Reimagine what's next with a new sense of exuberance. Why not power on like you mean it? Or power off blissfully? A better sleep is a better awake. You've never moved like this before. With the energy nature intended. Imagine reprogramming the way you look at the speed of science, at longevity, at exhilaration. It's next level rejuvenation. Take control of your well-being. from the inside out and outside in. The light within is ready to ignite. Be the light. LifeWave.
Please go to Live Younger with Lynn, LYNNE.com for more information. And I also have an email address there. I know people have a lot of questions since I haven't shared this much about LifeWave, but I want to help the veterans. And if you have any questions at all, please reach out to me through the email. Or if I can provide anything that John has said that he's willing to share with us, please reach out to me that same email, and I'm glad to provide that information too and answer any questions, because it did decrease my PTSD and anxiety, chronic PTSD and anxiety by 70%, saved my life. So John, the bill, and I have had scrolling across the ticker during the whole show, action steps that people can take who are watching.
Oh,
So let's take some time, and how can people, because we have a lot of people watching the show now all across the world, and how can people in the United States help support the bill and what you're doing to help our beloved vets?
thank you for the question. The bill is called the Written Informed Consent Act. All bills have a number, and this one is called, numbered, H.R. 4837. The sponsor of the bill, which means the congressman that brought it forward, is Congressman Gus Bilirakis, and just a courageous, wonderful person that's always helping veterans, and was the vice chair of the House Veterans Affairs Committee for many, many years. And his people just saw this and said, we want to move this forward. We want to be behind this, which was really wonderful. Since the bill was introduced, during its introduction, two other congressmen signed on. One was Keith Self. He's also on the Veteran Affairs Committee. He's an former Army Ranger and Special Ops person. And the other one is 3-star General Jack Bergman, the highest ranking military person ever to become a congressman.
Wow.
And let me just read one quote by Jack. I've had lunch with him. He's just a wonderful powerhouse.
Wow, I'm sure.
Yeah, he really, really is.
Yeah.
He wrote, the Written Informed Consent Act ensures that before powerful medications are prescribed, veterans receive clear, written information about the potential side effects. Veterans deserve full transparency when it comes to their care. This is about respect, accountability, and empowering veterans to make informed decisions about their health. It is simple, common sense. It is a simple, common sense step forward, improving trust and safety within the VA healthcare system. Plain, simple, but that's the way he rolls and the kind of person he is. And it is great. And I'm going to let you know, we also now have a senator who has agreed to introduce it in the Senate. I won't use the name because it hasn't been done yet.
Okay.
And of course, they like fanfare and on the introduction. But the idea is we need to get this done because it will, in my estimation, it will save the lives of thousands of veterans, right?
Right.
Let me also mention that Bobby Kennedy found out about this procedure
Okay.
and wrote me back directly and said he's interested in employing this under HHS, Health and Human Services. So not done yet, but I thought that was a good sign that he saw the validity of it, right?
Yes.
But if we can get this passed, and what it takes is a congressman, enough agreement by Congress to vote on this, to run it through Congress. And you probably always hear that congressmen want two things. And unfortunately, it's true. That's votes and money. Okay? Because because they want to keep.
I didn't know you were affirming what we all knew was true.
But they want to keep their elections going. They want to keep winning and so on. And I
Sure.
can understand that. That's the system they're thrown into. But right now, you could have a very big impact on helping this very sane initiative get enacted. If you just email your congressman, and there's an easy way to do that. There's a link. I think Lynn said she's putting it across the
Yes.
scroller. If you just go there, you put your address in, it'll just open up the door for you to write an email to your congressman. It's really that simple, right? And the other thing that you can do that has even a little more weight, if you want, is you can call the Capitol switchboard, and you tell them where you're from, where you live, and they'll send you to that office so you can leave a voicemail or talk to somebody and say, hey, I want my congressman to support this legislation, and just tell them the number. And let me give you that 800 number. And it's 800-224-3121. Once again, 800-224-3121. And both of those would be greatly appreciated. You would really be assisting, I think, the saving of worthy warrior lives, some of them that have no idea they're in jeopardy or haven't even received, maybe the medications that, maybe they're not being fully informed about. Let's get together as a group and save these lives and push this forward, because this needs to happen with all public. But let's begin by putting a tourniquet on these with our veterans. And Lynn, let me just say, I'm so impressed with you.
Thank you, John.
You've accomplished, what you've been through, what you've endured, and how now you're this megaphone for freedom, for help, for universal sanity, if you will. I just admire you and your work, and I want to thank you, and let you know I'm honored to be able to do the show with you.
Thank you so much, John. Your words mean a lot to me, and that I am honored to be here on the Patriots Prayer Network with you. And I'm honored that God has given me the mega voice that He has. We serve a mighty God, John. It's just it's astounding what He can do.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. And it takes leadership, and sometimes it just takes, like the people I'm dealing with in Washington, the nicest people, these veterans I'm dealing with, they're caring, they're powerful, they'll do anything to save their brothers and sisters, but
Yeah.
like everything else, they need, the truth and direction and suggestions. So, sometimes one voice can help with a significant change. And that's what I'm trying to act as, just like they do to me on other issues. And if your audience, can take part and, help us move the ball forward, again, that would just be wonderful.
Well, I agree. And while we're talking about the audience, shout out to those in the chat. We have Gideon Ari, and it looks like Dadgum Cats. Gracie the cat hasn't made an appearance this show. She's taking a nap, if you could see her. So Dadgum Cats really resonates, at least, or I would probably say loving cats. But the Dadgum, that's exactly like something my dad would have said, John. He passed a few years ago, but he's a vet also. And I didn't share this earlier. Matter of fact, I haven't shared this before, but he was heavily medicated by the VA. And whenever I would visit him, the pills that I would see in his medicine cabinet were off the chart. And he was addicted to everything that they had given him, and to mass quantities of everything that they had given to him. And it was just, after seeing him serve our country so well and for so long, to watch him into his life the last years so heavily medicated on those drugs, it just broke my heart. And that's another reason why I want to help, because it's like you said, we're not doctors, and we're not claiming to be doctors, but we do know that some of the system's broken, and you have some amazing solutions. and you're getting a lot of support from everyone who loves our vets, which we all love our vets, but I mean the organizations that are supporting and loving our vets, because we're going to fix this thing. We're going to make sure that they're aware of all of the alternative healing modalities, and they have informed consent for what they are taking and what they're being told. And John, I know you have to get out of DC, so I promise to watch the time. But as we wrap up, what website can people go to follow you? And
Thank you. My veteran-related organization is Veterans, plural, Strategic Solutions.com, and they can learn more about, they can watch videos, learn more about the issue, write me if they'd like. They can also write me at john.spagnola10@gmail.com. And again, I thank you so much.
well, thank you for being on. And to you folks listening, until next time, this is the Lynn Scott Hagerman podcast, where truth is rising, and so are we. Praise God.
Light breaks the shadow of the weary heart. Truth cuts the dark like a flaming dart. Voices rising strong.